Right, we shall now move on to our panel session. So, as discussed earlier, we have Tom, Sean and Bobby. They're each going to introduce themselves with a slide each, and then we'll go back into Slido. So if you've not already got yourself loaded in with that, you can either scan the QR code that's on the slide here, or if you go to Slido, the website, and use the hashtag thinkBIM 2022, then you can join in with our interactive discussion session with the panel. So first up, we're going to have Tom give a quick introduction to himself before the other members of the panel. Tom.
Hi, how's it going? Tom Oulton here. Currently at Ryde at Levett, well, newly at Ryde at Levett Bucknall. Saying currently, that sounds like I've already ditched it now. The reason I've newly started at RLB, and with the remit of transforming RLB before helping transforming our service internally to help our clients. And that was well rehearsed, wasn't it? So I'm directing and leading a professional services team, and we're looking to the future and always trying to accommodate whatever's going to be coming next. A little bit of background there. The reason I put on the HND building management thing, it's almost as if I pulled this directly off a slide set that I gave to a school, isn't it? So when I was speaking to people who weren't going to university, to help them not worry about not going to university. So that's a little bit of my background. I've been involved in 3D intelligent modelling since 1996, and most people know me as someone who does BIM and bangs on about it all the time, and I'll just shush because it's all there.
Okay, thank you very much, Tom. Next up to introduce himself is Sean.
Thanks, Duncan. Hi, everyone. So I'm Sean Kearney. I'm operations lead at Digital Adventures Advisory, which is part of MacDonald that helps clients with understanding digital, understanding data, etc. Been at Mott since I graduated in 2008. I'm a chartered civil engineer by profession. Started using BIM to help my engineering projects and haven't stopped going on about it since. Went over to Hong Kong for a few years to support them in terms of using 1192 as it was then, but obviously now 9650, in other words, getting to grips with how they deliver BIM on major projects out there. Came back to the UK in 2018, and most notably the last couple of years I led the Prosperity Fund BIM programme, which was helping 6 countries with their national level BIM implementation plans. So nice to meet you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Sean. And then third up we have Bobby.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Bobby Chakravarthy. I'm an architect by profession, or I think I am, rather than anything else. And I'm a partner and head of design at Arcus Consulting. We're a multidisciplinary practice in UK. I'm a fellow of CABE. I sit on a few panels at CABE, particularly the awards panel at the moment. I'm also a global board trustee for IOSH. IOSH is a membership body in 170 countries with about 50,000 members. So I sit on the global board of IOSH as a trustee. I'm a co-founder of MicroPass, and I'm just stepped down as being the past president of APS. I'm the past president of APS as well, and sit on the board of APS. My key interests are design, regulation, well-being, technology, and safety. It's quite broad brush, but that's what it is.
Okay, thank you very much, folks. Right, so first up is a context question for everybody. So if you would all like to tell us which part of the industry you are responsible or work in, what your role is, it will again help our panelists to understand what the range and the interest of the audience is. Okay, give that a few more seconds and see if we get some more votes. Yes. Oh, shooter votes. Right. Okay. Sadly, in the fact that the facilities management is right at the bottom, we don't have anybody from facilities management or people that are suggesting that they work in a manufacturing segment either. Okay, right. So we have good range as always good to see. And so we will move on to our first proper question, which is for Tom to talk through. So, Tom, over to you.
I've got some very simple yes or no questions. I've gone for very simple, easy questions, I think, which we'll go through on the rest of them. But it's just, will the golden thread improve client outcomes? Because I don't. How do you describe, the situation for that? It's a simple question. Will the golden thread improve client outcomes? We're moving away from output-based briefing, and we're wanting to move towards client to outcome-based. It's a simple question. That's you go.
It. We'll let you stop at that. We'll
it is what it
let
is.
The vote settle.
Just let me vote. Yes, absolutely is the answer.
Okay.
But it will take a while, yeah.
And that's not too bad. We're getting more people voting now, so that's good. So I guess that answers your question nice and straightforwardly. Is there anything?
Yeah, it's nice. It's nice to know because we are trying to move the industry away from the transactional nature of contracts of the past into actually focusing on what next, what happens next, why are we doing this, instead of just what are we doing. So I think it's important that we have this structure in place that facilitates that. So that this, for me, I'm happy with the response to this.
Okay, so bringing in Sean and Bobby, perhaps Sean first, any particular comments or thoughts that you have on that, or is it just a kind of a moment of sigh of relief and go, I'm in the right place, this is going to be all right this afternoon?
I think for me it's a fair reflection, and it'll link in, I think, with some of the other questions around the sort of barriers to making it work quickly. It's a fair reflection that I think it will improve outcomes. They'll have more information, they'll have better information at their fingertips and hopefully be able to manage it, but that'll take a bit of time for them to get used to actually managing it as well.
Okay, and Bobby, anything particular to add for
No,
yourself?
I think it mostly depends on the maturity of the information clients will have and will collect, and that's going to drive value anyway. So it's not going to be happening immediately, because the whole concept in terms of golden thread has, in many people's eyes, just started. So there is a time lag between it starting and happening and data started collecting. And once you have that data rich environment, which clients can use, then there's obviously many more benefits to come out of that. But time will tell, I think.
Okay, no, that's brilliant. Okay, then, so back to you then, Sean, if you would like to talk through your first question.
Yeah, so this question is just having a little think about, I think we want the building safety bill to be published. We want to see that. We're happy with it. We think obviously with Grenfell, etc., it's needed. But actually, is the industry ready for it? If it was passed tomorrow, for example, and we had to comply with it straight away as a mandate, are we ready to deliver? And that's all through the supply chain in all different sectors as well, across care homes, hospitals, housing. Do we think we're ready, or actually do we need a bit of time to upskill as an industry? Do we need time to upskill, as you say, like facilities managers and operators, etc., as well as the design, construction and sort of handover stages?
Okay.
And quite interesting, actually, quite interesting response to this one. In terms of, yeah, it looks like it's coming out as that the industry is nowhere near. So another of my questions later talks about maybe the blockers to that, so we could maybe discuss that in a little more detail, why people think that the industry at the moment is nowhere near able to deliver that golden thread.
So without stealing the thunder from your follow-up questions, what would your response particularly be? Or is it that I certainly have conversations with organisations when it comes to delivering digital information, whether you call it BIM or whatever, that don't believe they're doing anything. In actual fact, when you go and start to look, there is quite a lot there. Do you think that actually we are doing ourselves down and there is actually quite a lot there that might be used, or do you think it accurately is that that we are nowhere?
Wouldn't have been the answer that I gave. I'd have said that when we're not too far away, I think we might need a year or two for, I think it's more obviously there's really big, some of the key contractors and designers, etc., are really on top of this. But are they building all of these buildings? Are they building these care homes? Probably are building things like hospitals, but maybe the housing, it might be smaller contractors as well and designers who are involved. So I think there is some upskilling to do, but I would have gone for not quite ready yet, but not too far away.
Okay,
personally.
no, that's good to know. So, Bobby, over to you. Is there any particular things that jump out from this question for you? I appreciate it. First time you've seen it as well, along with everybody else.
I did, yeah. I think I was one of the 3% where we said yes, absolutely, basically. So I'm one of the minority of the people in terms of, I think there's, Sean, I think I kind of read it as, are we ready to deliver golden thread of information? Yes, we are, is my absolute answer. Are we ready to deliver golden thread of digital information? Probably not, is my answer. So there is a slight variance in terms of how I would have answered that question in 2 separate points. And also building safety bill, as much as everybody keeps talking about it, it's only relative to a very few buildings in this country which are above 11 meters and can have to comply with that. And there's very few operators who are working in that sector. We operate in that sector in terms of housing, and we are pretty much already doing it. Forget about are we ready for it? So in that case, yes, the answer is yes. But in terms of where the industry wants to be, in terms of gathering the digital information so that you have asset-rich data at the end of it, my answer is, I think not even listed over there, is we are nowhere near, I think, is the answer. So
Okay.
there's slight variation in how I look at it.
No, and it is a big, broad question. It's a broad subject. I think it's useful in the discussions here that some of these things pull out, we tease out those points. Tom, anything particularly you think?
Yeah, I think to echo what Bobby's just said, I think, are we emotionally ready? Yes. Are we capable? No. There's tools, there are rules, there's change, and you know, the construction industry, we love change, don't we? You know, we're always adapting, we're agile, you know, so that I put nowhere near.
Okay, so bring it back to you, Sean. That interesting point from Tom then of we're not capable yet. Would you agree with that, or how would you respond to that one?
I think that's where I was. I think there's a mixed bag of capabilities. I think there's some sort of excellence around that where people are capable of delivering this. And I read Golden Thread as digital because it's defined as being delivered digitally. So that's definitely a point to press. But I don't think that everyone's ready to do that right now. But there are pockets of people who can, or companies who can deliver it.
No, that's really good. Thank you. I think, again, it pulls out the fact that and it came up in the chat as well while we were listening to Steve's presentation, that we need to be clear to make sure we all understand the definitions and we all interpret those definitions in the same way. No, that's been really useful. Thank you. Okay, next, Bobby, we have your first question if you'd like to explain a bit more while people are collecting their thoughts and responding.
I think it is what it says. There's always brilliant things. We try and do a lot of things because we are often driven by regulatory compliance or driven by need to be better at what we do and driven by need to digitize in the industry. And I think my question is, how do we gain value out of this? Because at the end of the day, everything we do or undertake has to have some sort of a value, whether it's a social value or digital value or asset value or information value or a price value. And I think my question is around that. Where does the key lie in terms of deriving value? Often value, when it's spoken in terms of golden thread, is often going at asset level, which is at the operational level, and client gets the maximum benefit. I'm a designer. I would say, why do I have to spend all my time for you to gain that benefit? I'm playing devil's advocate here, but I think we all have businesses to run and we all have investment to make, and where is the right investment? And that's where my question comes from. What do people think?
Okay, we'll give it a few more seconds for people to respond to the question. Okay, it looks like it's always the way you say it looks like it's settling down and suddenly some more votes come in. It's almost like people are waiting for me to close the vote or something, and then they'll quickly get in. Just picking up on your point about value, that was really interesting. It's only in the last day or so I read an article that was talking about a golden thread of social value, possibly paraphrasing their term, but I think you're absolutely right that we've assigned the value of the asset, the physical bricks and mortar, and not thought again about these sort of wider contexts. But how would you respond to over half the people suggesting that we need some consistent project delivery? Is that
I think
good to hear?
that is I think that will be probably 30% of my response in terms of where I put value. I think we work in social housing. For us, the social value is quite keen as well, because by producing information and handing it over the information to end users, we are actually making them very rich in terms of the data they have. In terms of fuel poverty, where people are struggling with fuel bills and everything, if your asset is digitally enabled and can manage those things better, or client can make little tweaks by having access to that information, it creates a phenomenal amount of social value as well. And often the conversation is always at the front end of it. And I think we need to really start focusing on the back end of it, not just in terms of operational of cost of operational, but who else will benefit from that in terms of actually making the asset a digitally rich asset, and what are the benefits, wider benefits out of that. And I think I'm really keen to explore those social connotations that is going to come out of this in terms of value.
That's really good, thank you. Over to you then, Tom. And my question to you, looking at this response, is: do you think that this is the order you'd have expected to see in terms of what came first, second, third, and fourth? Does that give you hope, or does that challenge you, or whatever?
No, I mean, I think it's fine. I think it's nice that I think it's good that the no value, apart from compliance, is so low, that because in terms of, because that suggests a box ticking exercise, right? We'll get through the gateway, bang, 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 bang. Here's a digital deliverable. There's your envelope, or you folder structure. Away you go. Sayonara. But I mean, I went for assigning value because I think this comes back to the outcomes question that I asked before, is that actually from what Bobby was saying is that we are focusing on value. We need to focus on value. We've consistent project delivery. I mean, that should just, BIM supports that, you know, and EIRs and all of that, and robust information management, that delivers consistent project delivery. But this is about the golden thread. This is about more than, and I know that it's a difficult thing, isn't it? Because it is, on one level, it's just another means of capturing information, keeping that information safe, and meaning that and just making sure that you are compliant with the requirements. So that's that 4% down at the bottom. But it's what happens next with that perception from having having this golden thread of information. How can that be used? How can it be utilized? How can it be used to drive change and to support change into this outcome-based thing where people aren't going to die? Brilliant, no more Grenfells. But then once you've got a different mindset, so just having a building, just having an asset, it's how can we start using this information and using this this wealth of information we're capturing about our estates. You know, if we're a housing provider, yes, we know this about our estate. It's above 11 meters, 11 story, well, whatever it is, 7 stories, 18 meters. We're capturing this information because we have to, but how can we drive that onto other things, and how can we use that to make better decisions about our estate? And then how can we collectively use that information? And we go back to the national digital twin and everything like that. Is this going to feed back into that and move us away from just thinking about transactional projects all the time? And I think it's what happens with that information and how we use that information, which is where we're going to achieve the value. And I think it's something that we do need to be doing. I don't know if that makes sense to anyone, but we've got to start somewhere, and this is a really good start.
No, I absolutely think you're right on that. No, it all made sense. It will make even more sense in the recordings when people go back and review it again and realise the gems that you've been imparting. So not wanting to miss out with Sean's take on it. Sean, you spoke right in your bio slide about having worked with whole countries to help them deliver digital strategies. Where do you see that sort of the fact that consistent project deliveries come out top helps at a country level, not even just at a business level?
Well, I think I answered that as well, and I think that what I'm hoping is that the golden thread, because it's sort of focused on, it came out of a safety issue, didn't it, in terms of Grenfell. I'm hoping that that focuses the mind for clients and others to say, okay, I need this information about safety, but whilst I'm doing that, let's actually get our OIRs, AIRs, EIRs in place, because not a lot of clients have actually done that. A lot of people on the call will understand this. So that's hopefully going to give them the impetus to say, while we're looking at this, let's not just concentrate on the safety, let's look at the other things. And as the other chaps have said, that needs to lead to the end user. So OIR should be linked to the end user. You know, how is my building going to impact its occupant? And that rolls up to local level in terms of local government, but also up to national level. So when I was talking to countries across the world, it was, what are the key issues in your areas? What are the key problems in construction? And then you work down to the requirement based on the benefit that you actually want to achieve. And again, although this is probably has a safety focus, what are the wider benefits in addition to safety? I think Tom's point was correct. You know, yes, we need to make sure people are safe, but that's, you know, there's other parts of safety around well-being and actually sort of enjoyment of where you live or work.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that. Okay, we move on to our next question, which is back with Tom for his second question.
Sorry, just take myself off mute. Again, another real easy, well, a simple question. Whether it's an easy answer to whether it's an easy answer is: will the golden thread help save time and money for industry, for clients, for whoever? Who are you thinking about? Your prism.
And apologies, Tom, I added a few extra options in terms of whether it was just time or just money. And I know some people would argue that actually time and money are
time is money.
Yes, but it was just to tease out some different views and think.
I know that's why I put them together as one thing, because time is money. I didn't want time and money.
So again, if I tell everybody we've just about stopped, that should get us another 4 or 5 votes suddenly through. Yep, that's 2. Well, looks like you were born out, Tom. There you are. What would you like to say to the answer?
Well, I'd like to say yes, it will, because it's I'd like to think it's going to, because it's a structure. It is going to be a structured way of defining information, capturing information, and therefore delivering information. But also, if we start thinking about the golden thread and the different gateways that we go through, one of the big problems that I think there is inherent in the industry is things being signed off with caveats. Oh yeah, we'll provide own conditions. Yeah, we'll provide that later. We've not got that just yet. I think the point of the golden thread, the planning gateway 1, we've got construction gateway 2 and occupation gateway 3, is you've got to have all of your ducks in a row at that point. Boom, yes, right, now we can proceed. Boom, yes, now we can proceed. Yeah, now we can proceed. So you've got to have good information management. If you've got good information management, you're intrinsically having to make you're having to curate all of that information properly and pay attention to it, and it's going to save time and money, because I believe, because you're not going to have clients aren't going to accept delays in program because somebody couldn't get the stuff, couldn't put their information, get their information ready on time, because why not? So of course you should be able to. And then particularly it's going to help save time and money in operation and maintenance phase, because we've got this robust set of information that's accurate at handover that can then be used and is going to be actively used to maintain that building safety case of fire and structural of safety, but also it's going to get people used to using digital information and curating digital information. So we're going to have, it's going to be easier to access. So when you do have to find information out, you can go to it straight away instead of having to search. So for me, the answer is yes.
Very good. So heads up for Bobby, but I'll ask Sean first. But I'll ask you both the same question. With the second category respondents here, we've got the I'm not sure. What would be your, I don't know, say top 3 things that you would ask people, or you would tell people to how to get them from being not sure to yes, it will save money? So firstly to Sean, how do you think we move the not sures to being more confident?
I'd say first and foremost, easy example is the cladding debacle. So how much money has been spent over the last couple of years on replacing cladding, on people not being able to sell homes, on people not being able to move, things falling through. It's an astronomical amount of money. So I did say yes, it'll save time and money, but I think there's going to be a bit of a delay, a bit like, you know, when we first started implementing BIM, you know, you've got to get the processes right, you've got to be able to create and manage the information, which might take a bit of time. So I think in the medium term, it'll save time and money. But yeah, my example would be money spent on cladding. Okay.
And Bobby, how do you think you would persuade people to get from the not sure to yes, it will save?
I think it's a double-ended question. I think my response to that is yes, it will save time and money, but equally it depends where you sit, isn't it? If you're not digitized, it's going to cost you money rather than save you money, because you need to digitize in the first instance, which is going to cost you money, and then you will start saving money. But I think if you look at Grenfell fiasco, there are 4,000 buildings which are high-rise buildings in this country, and that was one, and the cost of that is going to be somewhere around 4.5 billion to rectify all the other buildings. So it's a phenomenal amount of time and a phenomenal amount of money already we are confirming that we're going to spend in rectifying the problem that we put in the first place. So, and that is often due to lack of right information available, lack of policy and decision making, plenty of things, plenty of mistakes have been made. And I think that itself should convince us that having the right information at the right time and going through a structured process of agreeing, not just sitting on the fence, but agreeing a point in the project will help the project move in a very efficient way. And that itself should save money. And then we have that 30%, 70% operational versus cost kind of a value as well. If we are saving money just at the cost level, imagine the amount of money we're going to save at the operational level. It's like people coming into this meeting, Duncan, you're admitting them with a click of a button. But if you have to ask 4 people, how am I going to admit that person into this meeting coming in? You will get nowhere. And I think this is what the system is trying to do, is it's simplifying that you press a button, you have all the information at your fingertips, rather than running around asking questions, basically.
That's a really good analogy. Thank you for that, Bobby. Okay, we move on now, Sean, to your second question.
Yeah, and again, no right or wrong with this, just interested to see who we think will sort of have the most important role in establishing that golden thread, understanding that obviously they all play a role. So right through from when you start designing through to the contractors, manufacturers, and then those people who I think are termed accountable person who are actually going to take the information and use it. So do they need to help feed back what they need, for example? So yeah, just interesting to see what people think.
Just to note again, folks, for this one, you can answer with as many as you think apply. So it's vote for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or all 6 options. Just waiting for a sudden shoot in voting after we said that, but everybody's giving it due consideration, which is good to see.
Contractors just come up on the outside and overtaken, I see that.
Yeah,
Any more whips? Doesn't look like it. So that's really interesting, and I imagine that contractors is coming up quite high because they tend to be the people who package up that information. If you're like, oh no, we're back.
keep going.
So establishing, sorry, I meant sort of forming and creating the golden thread. So that probably should have been maybe a little bit clearer, because obviously the accountable person actually then uses that information in the operation stage. But no, interesting, and really interesting to see the subcontractor, specialist and manufacturers getting quite high amount of answers there as well.
Yeah, I think it reflects well that everybody understands it's a team effort, that it isn't ever going to be one person, that there is that everybody has their part to play in creating this golden thread overall. Bobby, what would you take from this one? Are you equally positive from this one, or is there something in there that you think needs addressing?
I would have liked to see an option of client. At the end of the day, if the client doesn't want it, none of them will work for that. So I think when I looked at accountable person under the regulation, I've assumed client is one of the accountable person basically, and I'm assumed one of those duties fall underneath it. And I think client defines it, client derives it, they manage it, and they pretty much tell what needs to be done in terms of information. The rest of the team are only contributing in terms of their contribution rather than actually they're enablers, but the strategy is set by the client, isn't it, in terms of what information they want, how it needs to be produced, and who need to produce it. That's where your employer's information requirements come into play big time. And I see they have a big major influence in this particular field, I think, in how effective we are going into the next century in terms of data capture. They will play a really big part, and the ability of the client to make those decisions, digitally minded and digitally enabled decisions, will also play a big role in terms of how we go forward on this topic, I think.
Okay, no, thank you very much for that. And Tom, any final thoughts around this one before we move on to our next question?
I ticked everybody because everybody's responsible for this, establishing the golden thread in their section, doing what they've got to do to support the client who ultimately is going to benefit from this overall. So yeah, it's everybody. Okay,
no, that works. Thank you very much. Okay, so we're over to Bobby now for your second question around safety managers.
Right, this one has come up only recently. Mr. Gao, our good minister, has decided to scrap the building safety manager role, basically, under the new proposals. That's going to go, or at least it's not mandatory anymore. People don't need to appoint it. And my question is, in the absence of that role not being a mandatory role, can technology or digital twin actually replace the building safety managers? I think is the question. I mean, is technology mature enough in construction to take on that role on its own? Or are we saying, well, look, we always need a human being in terms of activating this and making sure that what's happening is what's actually there? Or are we saying we're not really forward thinking enough? We should really trust the technology and let the technology play a greater role in capturing and gathering the data and information on the building. Which one is it?
Interesting. Definitely people are having to think a lot more about this question, which is good. I like it. We'll give it a little bit longer though. See how the votes come in. Okay, as always, I'll say we've nearly finished and we'll get a flurry, but pleased to see that they're both interlinked. Does that technology and digital twins? No, explain to me what you believe by interlinked. Actually, let's make sure I've understood the question or the answer.
It's cross-checking basically, because technology relies on human beings and human beings rely on technology to a large extent, and that's what my response was, that they are probably both interlinked. As much as we can trust technology 100%, but sometimes we need a human touch on it to make sure that it is working fully. I think my response to this is, yes, they're both interlinked, but there's a time gap to it as well. I know some people posted in the chat that technology can't be accountable. If there are mistakes made, then who will be accountable? You're not going to blame a piece of technology for accountability, but that is not the case. The accountability is set at different levels. Client is accountable, designer is accountable, contractor is accountable, everybody is accountable. So you don't need one specific person to take the whole blame. So that golden thread of information, that's what it is about. Everybody is accountable at every stage in terms of delivery of the project. So that's not such a big problem for me, but I think there is a transition stage. I think initially, the maturity of the technologies, as much as there are a lot of mature technologies out there which does these things, the understanding maturity of the technologies is not there. And I think we need that person in the interim link to try and make sure that the information is captured, gathered, and made some sense out of it.
Okay, thank you very much, Bobby. Tom, what would your take be from the question and the responses here?
Yeah, you see, I was thinking that they're both interlinked. Because the technology is only as good as the algorithm, and that's only as good as the people who are programming it. You can still make spelling mistakes, I think we're a long way from Skynet, so I think it's humans augmented with the technologies, and being able to, as we know, machine learning, artificial intelligence used to do the donkey work, but then I still think that can be used to present options. And maybe I think there's going to be a transitional period as people learn to trust it, and before we stop thinking of Arnold Schwarzenegger coming back and assessing us for our biker outfit.
Yeah, I think it needs to be sufficiently robust that it just works all the time, that everybody is happy to accept it or whatever.
We don't have driverless cars yet. It's on the way. There's a long time. That transition is a long time coming, and there've been a lot of people working on that for a long time. And this is about doing buildings where people live, people work, people exist. So I think, again, we're going to have a very long tail on that. I mean, yes, we've got adaptive cruise control. That's kind of something that we're getting used to, but I don't just sit there and read the paper. Yeah, I think it's going to be similar with buildings as well.
My only challenge over here is that building safety managers don't exist now.
Oh, because of Gove?
No, I mean, even before.
Right.
The government decided to introduce that, or the Grenfell inquiry decided to introduce a building safety manager. There is no building safety manager. It was a term introduced when the Grenfell happened, and it looks like it's going before the regulation is out. So that's where my challenge is.
Maintenance team, rather than building safety manager. Let's think of that as a collective, which is the estates and facilities management team, a collective. And I still think
that would kind of link you to the way that roles have disappeared out of CDM regulations and become responsibilities. So I guess it's that sort of way. Sean, I'm conscious that we're all talking around this and not giving you a shout at this one. What's your take on this one, particularly as a technology-led business?
I threw something else in there, which was we're not forward-thinking enough. So I think even if we did have the technology to do this, I don't think as a sort of not even just as an industry, I think inherently we're not forward thinking enough to let like a digital twin or a bit of software sort of do this for us. And I think I've done a lot of work recently with the Nuclear Decommissioning Authority around their digital strategy, and it's all about people and changing cultures. And I think at the moment there's still a culture of this is so far away from sort of the culture of how we operate that I don't think we're forward thinking enough. But it's a nice idea, and at some point we might be.
Yes. You're not saying you wouldn't welcome it, but you just feel that there's a lot of groundwork still to be done before we can.
Yeah, and I think it's the culture thing that I don't think we'd let, and probably rightly so at the moment, because maybe it's not proven enough. And as Tom says about driverless cars, for example, it's an example. If it's not proven, we shouldn't really let it. And because of that, yeah, I don't think we'd push the button.
And there's also the fact that adoption will be slow, is always going to be slow, because it's going to disrupt existing successful business models for companies that make a lot of money. It's one of the main reasons why we never get any facilities managers here. They don't want good information on a building when you hand it over, because that's completely counterproductive to their business model.
Unfortunately, yes.
There's so much evidence of that. You know, it's money. That's what it all boils down to.
But I think Sean is very right. I think we're not, certainly within this industry, sometimes not forward thinking enough. We're not having a discussion over here. Let's look at digital twin, what it can do, and then how can we complement what it cannot do. We're actually saying, let's introduce a person, and then we'll see how a technology will fill some gaps here and there, kind of a conversation, which is kind of controversial to what we should be doing in many ways.
Okay. Really interesting discussion. Thank you very much for that question, Bobby. Okay, back to Tom for your final question, which is going to need a lot of explanation.
Yeah, well, this is where it started. So is this what it's going to do? You know, should Grenfell happen again? Would it help save lives? Would the outcome, is it going to benefit? Yes or no?
Get your vote in, Tom.
I was just really confused. One of the kids has come back home, but they realise they do a bloody half day on Wednesdays. Sooner they get back up to 32 hours a week, the better. That's what I say.
Very good. Leaving to that. Forward-looking thoughts from you. So, 24% not sure. Do we actually think that's a good thing? I know we can't ask that 24% why they're not sure, but just your interpolation of that.
Well, I think really, you know, there should have been checks and measures in place to make sure that a flammable building of that size didn't get built. You know, and it's all we're doing is mitigating the risk with this, and I think a correctly executed correctly constructed building with correctly captured and information that's gone through all the checks. And this is the thing, it's not just capturing the information, it's making sure that you've gone through the planning gateway. Yes, everything's fine. Construction gateway, yes, everything's there. Occupation gateway, yes, everything's there. And then 5-year building safety case, then hopefully, yes, but I'm not sure. It should do.
Okay. Sean, what would your take be on this then?
I think there's a bit in the chat which I agree with, and a couple of people said it around you've still got to meet the regulations. So if you're giving the golden thread of information, what is that information? And if that information is about a material that doesn't meet the regulations, having the information there is no better than not, if you know what I mean. So I think there's definitely something around making sure that that information is checked, and that the materials or whatever it is, it could be things like fire escape zones or something, that it's all sort of checked and is correct. But I think forcing the issue on digital will help, you know, making it golden thread digital, forcing that issue will help the other things be met, and it can be interrogated more easily than being in a big stack of paper where, you know, page 300 is the fire safety sheet of 5,000 pages or whatever it is that it could be in a current health and safety file.
So, just taking your point there, Sean, is there a? I'm going to say risk, but I'm wary at using that word. That if people fixate purely on life safety, that we will lose wider benefits of golden thread.
That wasn't really my point. My point was
sorry,
I might have not said it well. My point was more, if you've got a bit of, let's say, the cladding, maybe the golden thread was already in place and the digital information came through, but the cladding still went up, and the information, you know, you still got to meet that. A couple of people, as I mentioned, said it on the chat. You still got to meet that regulation, haven't you?
Right. No. Okay, I get that. That's fine. Bobby, your take on Tom's final question then.
I think I was not sure actually, because it's a very big global question at the end of the day. Whether having golden thread is a process, isn't it? Whether a process saves lives, okay, it gives you more information to look at in terms of avoiding mistakes and everything else. But mistakes will still happen in construction, I think, and that will cause accidents, and that will unfortunately cause people will die because of that. It's happening on a regular basis now. I mean, we have CDM regs. We have Health and Safety Act. People still die in construction out of hazards and everything. So my question is, I'm not sure if it'll save lives, certainly, but will it save every life that goes into the building because of this? Probably not. And I think there is also a bigger question about professional ethics, isn't it? I think that's what we should be really talking about. Is we are all in a profession and we have ethical responsibility to make the right decisions at the right time. Yes, the building regs was not absolutely clear about the flammability of this material, but the person who designed it, but the contractor who's building it, should they have been ethically making decisions? Is this the right thing to do? Am I putting people's lives at risk? And those things of cost and time, because of multiple reasons, because of clients' pressures, because of financial pressures, those things will continue to happen. And I think there is a lot more than just a set of process which will save life. And the biggest one which will save life is if we are all ethically professional about our judgments, I think, rather than putting a cost or time or any other values. If we put ethical value to it, then I think, yes, my probability of that yes answer will be in much higher place.
Really interesting point. Thank you for that. Okay, right, on to Sean and your final question for this afternoon then.
Yeah, and caveat this one by saying there could be a lot of others, but what do we think the biggest challenges are in the industry creating that accurate and accessible information? I say accurate and accessible. One, because it needs to be right in terms of the accuracy. It needs to sort of come through the supply chain. It needs to be on the money, but accessible because it needs to be used in, by the building occupiers. So is it things like actually it's an upskilling across the supply chain? We need more sort of training. We need more examples of how to do this. Is it just that information management is actually still, some pockets of excellence around information management, but it's still not deemed as sort of really, really important? Is it that, we can create some of that data in certain softwares, but we can't push it through to other softwares, or if we push it through, we end up with just with a spreadsheet, or other was another thought. But feel free to say on the chat if there's something else that you think is a bigger challenge than these.
Okay, we're rapidly heading towards the number of votes we usually get. So I'll say that again and watch a nice spur of 3 or 4 votes come in, hopefully, or not.
Interesting, because it's going back to that people thing, isn't it? It's,
Yeah.
when we have, because we're going to hopefully we'll get the bill, won't we, the safety bill, and then we'll get the guidelines. But people, if the guidelines are only good if people understand how to actually respond to it and use it. So I think that's coming through quite clearly in this response.
Yeah, it is interesting to see. Yeah, you would like to think that if the skills become more prevalent across the supply chain, then everything else will kind of fall into place, I guess. Bobby, what's your take on this one? Particularly where you've talked about digital golden thread, which is obviously our focus, of whether there's anything around technology interoperability, or are you happy to see skills seeing as the biggest challenge too?
Skills is an important thing, but I was in the bottom 5%. Basically, I'm probably the only one who voted on that. Raising the profile of information management, I think, is where I really put my focus on, because it's all well and fine having people having multiple skills, but if the profile isn't there, if the client is not asking for it, if the customer is not asking for it, what are you going to do with it? I think it's everybody within the design teams, the supply chain, the clients, end users, having an understanding of what information is and who is going to produce it, how are you going to operate it, and how are you going to use it as an asset. That is quite important, and there's multiple journeys to be had. And then I think as an industry, we certainly lack the profile that information management really require in this 21st century. I think we're still very backwards in talking about raising that profile of information management. We talk in silos about BIM, about interoperability, but at the end of the day, all of that is about raising profile of information management. For me, that is critical. Once we raise that profile high up there, then everything else will catch up, I think. Then you start having some serious debates about interoperability and everything else.
Okay. Tom, how does that, just thinking of Bobby's point, how does that echo to your new role at RLB in terms of raising the profile of information management? Or did you?
It's crucial. It's crucial. There's one of the things is all of these are relevant points that we've got here. So we've got four answers which could be given. Yes, we need to raise the profile so that people understand the importance of information management, and we need to make sure that we've got technology that's interoperable so we can capture that information wherever it's generated, bring it together, and then present it as the golden thread. And to do that, you need to have the necessary skills across the supply chain. It's one of the things is, yes, everything, we need all of that. And there's just been it's one of the things that always needs to be addressed is, and it's things like CPDs, continued professional development, or continuous professional development, whatever it stands for, CPD. Things like that need to be more than a box ticking exercise. And I think CPD schemes could be centrally, there should be central cores to those CPD schemes, which uplift the understanding of the industry at the same time. So we've got the golden thread coming out, which is dependent on all four of these things. So let's have a coordinated CPD response that uplifts everybody wherever they are in their career, and wherever you are, whatever task it is that you do on a day-to-day basis, that looks at the need for the golden thread and comes up with a CPD that is relevant to you, and there is a collective response and a collective learning that lifts everybody's up at the same time. And CITB isn't something currently that's capable of doing that, but there needs to be some way of lifting everybody up at the same time to make sure that we can do all of these things.
No, I think that's a very interesting point, and I think you're right that that kind of, it's not one size fits all, but a common message to all is necessary to try and get some of these step changes, which is part of that skilling, reskilling, improving the skills or whatever of the industry. No, it's really good. Thank you. Okay, and now to our final question and this one's from Bobby again.
Again, it's quite simple. Is there a golden nugget, basically, to resolve the fragmentation of data in construction? I come across that every day. I think I get information in all shapes and formats, and often I'm bewildered, awestruck to say, hang on a minute, what am I doing here? Kind of a question. So, and I think there are multiple challenges associated with that, but somehow us as construction industry, we seem to have really not cracked this code. There are still very large amount of silos in terms of data that is there, and nobody has really taken a grip of it and then said, hang on, there's a better use for this. Can we do it in a more cohesive, collaborative way of managing this data? I'm not saying it's not happening, but it happens in a very marginal places rather than a broader construction industry.
Okay. Votes are slowly coming in. It's interesting. I can think of at least 4 people that would have 4 very strong views on each of those answers as to which is the one to solve it with. It is interesting. I think, as we seem to be slowly coming to a halt with the votes. The interesting one for me, or perhaps the hopeful one for me in that, is that people are seeing exchange information requirements in that's come out top, which at least implies that they are existing now in the industry rather than not even being there. But what's your take on this one then, Bobby?
All of them. is the word I'm deliberately putting.
You can only pick one. Pick your favourite child. Which one?
Absolutely. I think open source is one of my big bugbear. I think when you make a technology closed source, you make it very limited. And I think the world is more moving towards open source. If Tesla can do it, I'm sure construction can do it. So that's how I see it. The open source is one of the clear pathways out of this problem. And biggest thing for me is client. Client often doesn't really prescribe what's the best way to do it. They just leave it for bloody design teams sometimes to manage it, and they have their own preferences. But if the client takes some leadership in terms of saying, well, look, at the end of the day, I'm going to manage this information. It is important to me for me to have this information collectively in this particular format. I think we will lose a lot of defragmentation as well. And that includes the public sector client taking a bit of leadership role in terms of that.
Yes.
And that has to be linked back to the open source. It can't just be one big organization getting everything. So there are positives and negatives out of that. I'm not so sure about maturity of technologies. There are a significant amount of technologies, both within and outside construction, which we can use. But I think more needs to be aware of all those technologies, I think.
Okay, no, that's really interesting. Thank you. Tom, what would your take be on that? Do you agree with the priorities that have come through, or again, are you sitting at the bottom of the pile there, actually saying those should be the priorities compared to our respondents?
I think the EIR is good, but I'm looking at the comments on the right-hand side, and we've got Adrian saying that EIRs won't be in place without client leadership, and I think client leadership is the way forward. I think the client should really take control, but it's difficult. It's a tricky thing, but we've spent my entire working career has been spent undermining the client at every single opportunity. You know, we see them as a cash cow, and we try to rinse the client for every penny that we can get. And that client may be because I'm in the subcontract team, so it's the person above me, you know, or the person above them, or it's the main contractor, or the main contractor is trying to get as much money out of the client as possible. And the client isn't empowered enough because of human nature in the way that we're always trying to make money, and the client needs to take control, and we need to allow the client to take control. Everyone that knows me knows that I think that the entire way the construction industry is set up needs to be stripped down and rebuilt from top to bottom, because it's purely in the support. Well, you know, I'm not a capitalist really, and I'm not 100%, you know, behind the way that society has turned out, but we need for that we need client empowerment, and they need to take control, and they need to know that they can take control. And actually, we'd respond well to a strong client. One of the reasons we're able, you know, a lot of the waste in the industry is through rework or doing things again or changing things, because we've not had strong leadership from the people who are giving us the money to do it. So you know, the client needs to take control, but the client needs to understand that they can take control, and actually we want it. We want clear direction.
Yeah, I think I would echo your points, and I think that the industry as a whole needs to inform clients to get them to see what that value is for them and why they should be doing it. Sean, you're talking to clients, whether at a project level or at a national level. Where would you take on this then?
I liked your point there, and I'll elaborate on a bit around we need to help clients, because I do think that is probably the bit that would move the needle the most. But at the same time, a lot of the knowledge, a lot of the experience, a lot of the expertise doesn't unfortunately sit in the client groups. So we've got to actually help them learn how to actually specify what they need. So yeah, it's definitely, I think the client is probably the main one, but yeah, they can't do it all themselves. They need our support. I guess the other thing I'd say is that you know, when you look at exchange information requirements, they'll be on one particular appointment. You need sort of interoperability so that the people who did the surveys 2-3 years ago and they've produced all this data around ecology or around whatever it is, geotechnics, then the contractors 4 or 5 years later could actually interpolate that data and get that data as well. And that might not be done with an EIR that just focuses on one appointment, and things change. So that's where the open source enablers come in and help actually transfer data between different parties and actually make it usable.
No, I think there's been some really good points this afternoon. So that brings us to the end of our panel session. So I will first of all like to say thank you very much to Tom, to Sean and to Bobby, particularly to Tom, who got thrown in at about 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon to come and join the panel, but to all three of them because they don't get to see each other's questions. They then have to respond on the hoof when the answers aren't perhaps how they thought the audience was going to do, and then they have the added benefit of me throwing curveballs at them as well. So I think they did a sterling job this afternoon to come up with some really interesting points and some really interesting discussions from the questions that they've asked. So I would recommend to everybody, when we publish the videos from this again on the YouTube channel, go back and have a second listen and have a think, and perhaps even think about how you'd answer the questions and then how the conversation went afterwards or whatever. So I would like to say thank you very much to our panel. In his absence, I would like to thank Steve Baker for the sterling presentation he gave us. It was a great conversation he had. As I said before, hopefully we can get Kirsty to do either a conversation with me again or to deliver a presentation, some sort of combination of all of that, that we can then post, and we can get her take on all of this as well. So thank you very much for everybody for their participation. As always, to Liz and Donna in the background for making the event happen. So I think it's been really interesting. I think it's been a really good discussion. I think it has shown one of the comments I said back at the beginning with Steve, the breadth and depth that the golden thread potentially involves. And that does make it potentially another big elephant for the industry to deal with. And we've got to find the simple ways to start sort of digesting it one bite at a time. But I think it's been some really good and insightful conversations this afternoon. So thank you very much. Looking forward now to thinkBIM for the rest of the year. We have confirmed dates, so the 15th of June, the 21st of September and the 7th of December. Quite what the format of those is going to look like, we shall see. We would dearly love to get back to face-to-face. We have provisionally got rooms booked at Squire Patton Boggs in Leeds, potentially for live face-to-face events, so hopefully we can make those things happen, but those are the dates for your diary moving forwards. And then only remains for me then to just say once and all again, thank you very much for everybody who has taken part this afternoon, whether it's our speakers, Tom, Sean, Bobby, Steve Baker previously, for everybody that's got involved in the chat. I've seen odd little bits, not everything, but it sounds like there's been some good conversations going on there. If we haven't managed to answer every question that's come through, then we'll go certainly and look in the chat and see what we can do to answer those. So thank you very much, folks. And it looks like you've got 10 minutes for a coffee before your 3 o'clock meeting. Thank you very much and goodbye.